Sachin speaking second.
So the motion for this round is this House hopes that the future of humanity is transhumanism. Fantastic. Okay, without further ado, I invite the Prime Minister to begin the debate.
I rarely get these opportunities. I'm a very weird person. I don't like some aspects of myself. I can be a real asshole sometimes. I don't always know how to connect with people. I don't have the balls to approach some girls. I'm very faulty in a lot of sense. But that is what makes me me. And that is why this is me. All of these traits, all of these faults in my human condition, random faults, as they say, this is what makes me me, and this is why I am living. And this is the only metric that is the most important in this debate. So, notice that, let's deal with opening government first. Notice, they say now we provide people with agency to choose what they will actually, how will they live their lives. Two problems. Number one, they ignore the vast side effects of this, such as the huge inequality that will become because of this. We will weigh it out. But secondly, we don't, even if this grants them more agency, we don't think this is a good choice for them. An analogy here is, let's make every people drug themselves with heroin. Overall, that is good for them. They will be much more pleasant. On the short term, this is a good thing for them. They are happy. They have a high. We think that overall, this destroys their lives in the long run, and this is how we will weigh over them. Even if they have some agency, we don't think this is a good choice people should make. Let's just address the counterfactual, just clearly. The counterfactual is we probably don't find this technology at all, right? We don't want extension to do something wild. So before I get into argumentation, one quick framing. Why this destroys the line between your sense of self and this machine that kidnaps your identity. Why? Firstly, it takes away your core functions. It takes away your thinking. In the info slide, it says you have interface in your brain. You will see it will do a lot of thinking for you. It will do a lot of calculation for you. It will help you. It will be a voice in your health. But secondly, the things you see, now you have a physical barrier. I don't see you anymore. I see you through the lens of a machine, of an interface. I cannot connect you at all with how I used to be, right? But thirdly, oftentimes this is only even moving. The control. I know I can move my arm left. I know I can move my arm right. And that's what makes me me. But these machines, this transhumanism takes away that aspect of me for me to control myself. Over the time, we get used to this. We get used to this for this machine to kidnap our basic abilities. And over time, we distinguish ourselves and lose our senses of self precisely because of this. This will come in later. But firstly, why does this increase inequality highly? Firstly, notice that this technology will be very, very expensive. Number one, you need huge innovation to actually create this technology. This is something that we have never actually seen before. You need to throw millions, millions, and millions of money to actually create something like this because we are not even close to discussing discovering this. But secondly, when someone does discover this, it will give them huge comparative advantage for them to create a monopoly, meaning that they can also pump the prices up. Because this is so expensive, right? This will be only available to some richer people, to millionaires. They can take advantage of this. Notice, even if they say at some time in the future, it will, due to market, become less expensive and become more available to, the other people, it will be too late because the richer people that use the technology will already advance so far cognitively in their career and accumulate much more wealth. What are the advantages we are talking about? Number one, they are just more smarter. They can just process things faster. They can be creative much more. They can think much more faster than the average person. But also, they have a physical advantage. They can endure much more. They don't need to sleep. They don't need to suffer, normal human anxiety or some other emotions that are incapable, crippling them, right? This means that jobs, schools, it will be taken by much more richer people because they can ace their tests further. Their companies will be much more efficient. Their companies will be much more innovating. In their hobbies, in sports, in other things, they will dominate because of the huge physical and mental advantage they have. Notice the counterfactual. It's randomness. This means that even people who are not well off in the counterfactual can be born with a high IQ, can be born and can actually advance in our society to other pre-existing mechanisms, and they can actually, escape this inequality. We believe that the impact is that this furthers the gap between the rich and the poor much, much further. And no agency can compensate that, because when we're talking about agency, money is also needed for agency. You need money, you need jobs, and when you're losing them because you don't have enough money to feed yourself, that is how you also lose agency. So that is how you also weigh over them, right? But let's talk about the second, I think, more interesting part of this debate. Why, on the practical, this is awful for the human conditions. Firstly, you lose your sense of self. Notice these things are random, as they say, genes, how my parents brought me up, what values will be me. But this is what makes me me. Why? Because this is firstly passed of these thoughts to the prism of my values, to the prism of my abilities. But also, me like that. They know I'm the person who does not connect with people very well. I think, thirdly, I think other people perceive me like that. It also entrenches my identity. So I build myself. I am nothing more than these values. I am nothing more than how people think of me and how I think of me. And the crucial thing for this is these faults, is these human conditions that we are talking about, right? And now we lose this, right? Why do we lose this? Because all of these limits, all of these cognitive biases, values that we had, we will remove them because they are not as desirable objectively as they could be. And we lose this sense of self, right? And this is akin to metaphysical suicide, right? Because even if I don't die literally, my brain died. Everything that made me destroys like tears in the rain. And that is why we should oppose this. Before that, I'll take closing.
If AI is going to exist on both sides, shouldn't we fuse with AI, combine with AI, so we have more control over it?
No. I don't think we should do this. Anyways, so why the second part of this practical is why human interaction becomes much, much worse between humans, right? Firstly, notice for good human interaction, I firstly need to have a sense of closeness with that person. Meaning that if I want to get close to someone, I need to know we are close. I need to know we are friends and we actually communicate. But secondly, you need emotion, you need love, you need hate, you need envy, you need all of these things to actually, have a connection with someone. To know when you see them, you feel all of the emotions in your stomach. You see the nostalgia in your brain, what you have went through and how this makes you friends, how this makes you partners and stuff like that. Now we destroy this, right? Because the perception changes. You don't believe you're talking to that person anymore. You believe you're talking to a robot in a sense, right? Because number one, you know that person has a GUI and you also have a GUI inside your brain, right? You don't perceive it as a human anymore. But secondly, as opening our mentions, this is meant to curtail your emotions, to curtail your memories, to curtail your, identity. All of these things influence how you interact with people because you don't have these abilities anymore. For all of these reasons, I like my faults and I like myself and I don't want machines to take over. Thank you.
Thank you to the Leader of the Opposition for that speech. I'd now like to invite the Deputy Prime Minister.
Can I start? Imagine you could have any information in the world in the span of seconds, or that you could go 90 miles an hour and get to like Burgas faster from Sofia so you don't die of heat. Or imagine you can see your mom from like miles away. All of these things are currently available with a car, with your phone, with anything that has access to internet. So it's kind of natural that at some point we want to get away from just the technology that helps us and actually integrate them within ourselves. Because realistically, we think we're a lot more than just a combination of thoughts and a combination of cells. All of your cells die. You change your thoughts all of the time. Maybe you grow and become a better person. You are none of those characteristics and none of them should define you. You are the person that gets to decide whether or not you want those characteristics to remain you. What does this show you? Firstly, that the level of accessibility that we're discussing in the end, when this actually becomes the future of humanity, is just as accessible as a car nowadays or a phone, which is quite accessible. Secondly, it feels quite unfair for opposition to deny this for humans, because realistically, the kind of things that we're talking about are fundamentally different than just access from the internet. It's me actually being able to never get hit by a car and die again because I have like titanium bones or something. Me being able to prolong my lifespan as much as I want, or to have all of that information in a second in order for me not to waste my time trying to gather it and understand it. This is the kind of information and ability that you now give to the population. So let's see what is Ops' contention in order for them to deny all of this to humanity. Firstly, agency, that it doesn't matter and you become a fundamentally different person. And I actually have a question for everyone in the room. You all have intrusive thoughts. You all have thoughts that you don't enjoy. Are you those thoughts? Are you the bad things that you have ever done? Are you the characteristics that you don't like about your body? Obviously not. Not only can all of these things be changed, especially under the motion, but all of those things don't represent you, because you fundamentally are the consciousness behind it that is able to choose those thoughts, that is able to go to therapy if they no longer want to have those things. So fundamentally, you as a human, and this is an argument about like the human condition, are agency. So agency should be prioritized because that's the most human thing we ever had. There's no animal in the world that can choose what it is the way humans do. That's why we should prioritize this principle over anything else. Second rebuttal they have is saying monopoly. Only millionaires will get access to it. Here's a few issues. Firstly, this applies to any new technology. It is quite uncomparative. I'm unsure why we shouldn't have had cars because like rich people had access to it first. But then they say, oh no, because they have this technology, they're now going to be so miles ahead of anyone else that we're never going to catch up. Realistically, this can apply to any other technology, especially like AI or the internet or anything else. I don't think that this is a tipping point for us to decide not to use technology, because eventually the rest of humanity does catch up. Last point here. I think that realistically, they don't prove to us why this is going to be the case, because we don't know what this future is going to look like. We hope that the people are going to have like a communist revolution, or they're just going to think that realistically, this is technology that is life-changing, and they want this technology so badly that they're going to pressure their governments, they're going to protest in the street to make it accessible or to restrict access to the millionaires until it's accessible to anyone. This is better mechanization than what OO gave to you about how this is going to look like, which I think makes it a bit more plausible. Even if OO and CO spend all of their time saying, but the millionaires will have it and here's structural reasons why they're going to restrict access. We don't care, because under the motion, the future of humanity will at some point become that most people have access to transhumanism. So even if the process to get there is extraordinarily heinous, we still want to make the trade-off, because all of the suffering that happens in those months is realistically, one, uncomparative to the suffering that people currently have, two, uncomparative to all of the suffering that is alleviated from now until the end of time when humans are no longer and we can actually save them from all of the suffering that they have to go through. So on scale, we think that our impact should be prioritized over the ones of opposition. Before I continue, please. Closing.
Yeah, so the problem when something becomes a majoritarian norm is that you have to opt in, so you don't have agency if you want to compete with others and stay.
Here's the thing. So I'm going to firstly interact with this about whether or not people are actually going to have agency over this. I want to make it very clear that if I can choose the color of my eyes, that means that I have the technology to like make them go back if I want to. So all of this technology is reversible. I can opt in and out of the transhumanism technology at any point that I want. Sure, opposition can say that I'm going to be unable to choose because I kind of have to do that in order to exist within society. I will explain in a second why that's not the case, but realistically, I can choose to do that for a few years and experiment with it. I can then choose again to go back to like my roots as like the humans that evolved from apes and so on. I can get to choose all of those things, and we don't care what your choice is. We actually care that you are able to do it afterwards. So we think that this is the most important thing, because it guarantees you that you have access to yourself like never before. And even if you regret part of it, I think that you are still exerting your agency, and you can exert your agency back to switch between them. So there is no actual harm that is being committed. Now let's analyze whether you're actually going to be happier. Op will push that realistically you're going to be either forced into it, or you're going to get so accustomed to this that it will no longer make any sense. What does actually create suffering for humans is the fact that, yes, we do get accustomed to the things we have, so then we are searching for more. And the pathway that we need to take for more is generally inaccessible to us. That's what creates suffering. We don't suffer when we know that there is a specific pathway that we need to take, and we have the access to information, we have the ability to do things in order to improve our condition. Where most suffering actually comes from is knowing that I'm never going to be able to study enough to be smart enough in this lifetime. I'm never going to get the money of Jeff Bezos because it's physically impossible for me to work hard enough to become a billionaire. Realistically, because you don't have access to all of these things and there is no pathway for you to access the things you want, that's when suffering appears. That's what transhumanism resolves, because it gives you access to all of the things you need. You now have the information, the expertise, the body that you need in order for you to access the specific thing that you want. So you remove the main thing that creates suffering. Will you get bored of those things? Sure, but you can just move on to other things because now everything that you want to do is more accessible than it ever was, thus increasing your agency. So that makes you happier. And even if they say that we don't find the tech to begin with and this is the alternative, I want to point out how crucial it is that if we don't invest into this technology, realistically, we're also not going to be able to solve a lot of the other issues that humans have, such as the fact that we're aging and that will eventually create issues for us. So clearly, regardless of who is happier, what we should prioritize is the fact that you get to choose what constitutes happiness towards you. Last thing, we think that society will look fundamentally different than it currently is, because realistically, there is no competitive advantage for anyone anymore after a certain point. When you can choose to be smart, or you can choose to be powerful, or you can choose to look good, nobody has an actual advantage. What does this mean? Firstly, the demise of capitalism, fortunately, but also we think that the arbitrary differences between individuals are now gone, thus increasing our ability to actually engage with the human part of ourselves.
Thank you to the Deputy Prime Minister for that speech. I'd now like to invite the Deputy Leader of the Opposition.
Okay. Okay. On the OG's points of this being your right to self-expression or to choose your life, notice that this does not work in this abstract. Why? When do we value your right to choose something and to have the agency? That is when you have that right in the first place. That is to say, you do not have the right to some imaginary amount of money. You have the right to right for your money that you have in your life. You do not have a right to change how the universe looks like, or where are the stars, or what are those things, because that's not something that we as humans perceive as something yours in your brain. But even when it's, tied to yourself, why do you have the right to self-expression or to something? Because in order not to have it, others have to restrain it from you. Others have to take it from you, and that's what we forbid. That's what we in society value as something bad. But up to the point when it's so abstract that, it's not that someone is taking it from you, it's just that it doesn't exist anyway. You do not have a right to do it. But secondly, when we prove to you, and I hope that at the end that this will be clear, that it's not, that it's completely unequal, that you don't have the right to actually choose what to do, that falls. When we actually change how much, the difference between people is, you have no choice. But thirdly, when everybody around you starts to using this, because it's competitive advantage for work, for, for education, for everything, then you don't really have a right not to choose it. You have, but you're so disenfranchised that you're likely to choose it. And even you technically have the right, you're so much, into this that it's not the right to choose. Okay, why is it likely that, at the end of the day, we have so much inequality? They say, well, everybody has it. Okay, think about it. Everybody has a car, but some people have literally $1 million car, but some people literally have $100 car. The problem with this is that with car everybody moves, so it's just a little bit fancier. With this, it's literally changed your ability to actually live your life. It's literally changed the ability to be competitive in everything. It literally changed the ability to actually be better in education, better in work, better in everything. This is literally horrible. You're just making the difference with anything more larger. And at the point at which everybody concedes that at least least at the beginning, the more wealthier, we have more money. This makes them even more likely to actually, make a gap bigger, because now they're in a competitively better to even increase their right. They have more ability to be more productive. They have more ability to earn more money. So it doesn't end capitalism. This just makes capitalism 100 times worse, because you just increase all of those values. When someone have much more ability, even if you gain that ability 100 years later, they're having ability now to just increase this gap. What do we bring you, not now, at the end, what do we bring you and why is it extremely important? Noting that with this technology, which almost at the end will in some form, everybody use, you do not feel yourself. You do not feel that what you do is actually you. This is literally some machine making decision, but it's not just giving you, advices what to do. This is the point where you do not know whether it's your decision or the decision of this, whatever it is. This is the point where you do not know when you actually do something. Is it your or is it not? First of all, what it means is that every achievement you do is actually somewhat not yours. Winning the EUDC is not really now yours. You don't value it that much. You don't think that it's actually what you did. This is horrible. Every interaction which you have with another human beings is not really emotions of another human beings. Love you by someone, you don't know what percentage of that love you is by that person and what is but machine, chemical, or whatever it is. That's why we don't value it. That's why it's not, it loses the feeling that it is actually meaningful to people, that it comes from that person. But thirdly, it just makes you doubt in yourself your whole life. Whatever you do, notice that even if it's not the top of the world, people are used to have some achievements, and that's what's driving them. When your achievements are something that is driven, but that's something it's not, that's you don't value it that much. You doubt in yourself. That is why we do not consider when someone is doping in sports that they actually achieve something good, because we think that it is altered, but something that's not, inherently human. Second thing is, and when the OG says you remove bad emotions, we say this is the worst thing that can happen. Although a little bit unintuitive at the beginning, think about it. Bad emotions makes your good emotions actually good and valuable. When you're sad, that's what makes the difference. That when you're happy, you do something. When you lose a round and you're so sad about it, that's what makes the next round that you win actually worth it. If you're not sad when you lose the round, there is no quality in actually doing it. When you're actually feeling down, the difference when you actually feel good is when you actually do something. And they're saying you're gonna have bad expectation. We say it is great, because the feeling that you have through the path to that expectation is much more important than failing at the end. Just think about it. If everyone who comes to this EUDC would come with the thinking of realistic, expectations, what they will do at the end. This is the worst thing ever. I probably wouldn't be standing here if I wasn't hoping for something that I probably cannot achieve. But that's what's driving me. That is what making this experience better. They're actually enjoying thinking they have 10% ability to actually do something. Closing.
By your logic, should criminals and sociopaths not try to rehabilitate themselves, seeing that this will change a fundamental part of who they were to that point?
No, because when you actually rehabilitate, whatever you do it by yourself. When you actually change something, someone can help you. You can build whatever you want, but it is your change. It is something that it's in your self. At the end of the day, it's not that way. Why will not humans get used to it? I think that it is part of themselves, because you have path to this. It's not that it's being like this from the beginning of the age. You have that transition period in which humans will inherently think that way. You cannot erase this. This is the same with drugs. No matter how long and how used we are with drugs, we still think that you're on drugs. You're not thinking clearly to yourself. How do we weigh against them? They're giving you some benefits of better life. We say better life is not, some quality. It's actually emotions that you feel. It's the happiness that you feel. And that's what you get on our side, the meaning of life. The happiness in interactions, the happiness in achievements, the happiness in hoping. That's what you lose on their side because you don't feel yourself. Please oppose to this.
микрофона. Така. Добре. Ето, има ли разлика? Окей, нямаше. Окей. Starting in 3, 2, 1. I want to start with an intuition just so I don't waste 4 minutes of my speech. The future of humanity is AI. Does that mean that there won't be a Terminator that kills us? Does that mean that AI will be accessible and beneficial to society? No, it doesn't. You have to prove why the average person can buy the technology to begin with. You have to prove why the technology in its good variant, in which it doesn't malfunction, doesn't have side effects, actually allows you to be happy, actually allows you to modify your brain in a way that maximizes agency, can be bought by the average person. This is contested within the debate, either in our worst case, during the transitional period, which is likely to be massive, but secondly, even like in our best case, the end result. The future doesn't mean that if the majority uses to some degree, it is accessible in its best format. This thing has to be proven. So, why is it likely to be true? The first reason, and I think this is the strongest reason, is that corporations care about maximizing their total amount of profit. If they are exclusively selling to rich people, this actively means that there is a significant cap, because we already have wealth inequality to some degree, to the total amount of consumers that are actively buying this particular technology. They can cut the price by 50% and increase the total amount of consumers by 100 million people, which means the total amount of revenue is likely to be significant for those corporations if they make it as accessible as possible. But furthermore, corporations not only care about the short-term profits, right? They care about ensuring that their own consumers are capable of buying future technologies that are also different modifications of this technology, because it's likely to have different devices. Like, there isn't a single phone, right? There are 1,000 variations with 1,000 functions. So they want you to be able to buy other variations as well, right? And they want to ensure that society doesn't combust with wealth inequality, because if people become too poor, if there is a massive degree of wealth inequality, what happens? People cannot buy your future devices when the next version actively comes out, which is why the profit incentives are aligned with making the price as low as possible. The second reason that I would posit is that natural competition is likely to exist. I don't have to prove that there'll be like 20 companies, only that it's the status quo with like technology, like phones, like 4 major companies that are actively dick swinging and competing to lower the prices as much as possible. The reason as to why it is likely to be structurally true is firstly a purely market desire reason. If the analysis of opening government is correct, and there is a huge opportunity for you to market it in a way that maximizes the agency of people, makes you instantly happy, and actively ensures that you're better able to improve your life, a lot of people are likely to buy it, or you can make marketing campaigns that ensures that you are likely to persuade people to buy it. But secondly, this is a capacity reason. You cannot monopolize every single fucking market, because this is such a broad technology. This is why there are 3 examples within the info slide, because you cannot create a technology for every particular thing. You just cannot expand as much as a company, meaning there is likely to be a natural competition that actively exists in this particular way. The third thing that I would say, even if wealth inequality is likely to persist to some degree, it is not likely to be harsh enough for the impacts of opening opposition to manifest. Why? Because if, for example, imagine we have transhumanism technology number 2. What happens? 2 years down the line, transhumanism technology 3 actively rolls out. The new one comes at a premium price. It has extra features. It is 20% more efficient. What happens to the previous technology? It has to be sold. Thus, you sell it at a fucking discount. This is actively what happens with every single existing technology. Even if the disparity exists to some degree, it is not as significant enough to the point in which the person cannot access that technology in any variant possible, because companies wish to diversify their profits, meaning they wish to sell to rich people with extra features, they wish to sell to middle class people, they wish to sell to poor people to begin with. And the fourth reason, if the government understands that this technology is dangerous and is likely to create wealth inequality that could threaten society, like making people feel horrible, increasing the likelihood for crime, they preemptively subsidize those particular technologies and actively ensure that people have the ability to buy a basic version that allows them to compete in the market to begin with. I would like to finish with an intuition pop. ChatGPT costed billions of dollars. How much does it cost to buy it? $20 a month. It's not that hard to imagine that even if the initial costs are large, if billions of people are buying it, the individual cost for a person is likely to be considerably low. Why is this crucial? I have already done some weighing, but the second thing that I would say, even if you buy to some degree the plausibility that it's going to be accessible to some people as per opening government, even if we increase it by, let's say, 35%, this is 35% more people that can actively access this particular agency. They can actively access the ability to control their life, which means that we are more likely to significantly increase the likelihood for opening government to access their impacts. Because the principle doesn't work in the abstract. The principle works if you have a technology that actively functions in a way that allows you to access it, and you can continuously buy it, repair it, and get further modifications to actively ensure that you're living your life in a better way. But the second thing that I would say, let's say that perhaps you can get happiness, but comparatively on the other side, you could get certain side effects, you could get like identity erosion. Why is it more likely for this technology to be massively regulated in a way that ensures that the benefits that opening government has manifest in more cases than the negatives that opening opposition has? But before I continue, I'll take a point from opening, yes.
Yeah, you can mitigate it as much as you want. People who are struggling to make ends meet will inherently have extremely less ability to do this than
Yes,
to
thank you.
people.
Asserted. ChatGPT costs $20, even the poorest person can actively buy it. I don't fucking care about this. 3 reasons as to why the worst harms are not likely to manifest, tipping the scales towards the impacts of opening government. The first and most obvious reason is that this technology poses a existential threat towards governments because it gives a much more power to corporations to control the minds of people and to actively alter their preferences, which is why people on the ground are likely to be fearful and distrustful towards this technology to begin with, but also the government has a massive pragmatic incentive to continue to control corporations because they're actively the ones that control the most resources within society. Secondly, corporations have incentives that not only align with efficiency, that is to say the technology being useful, they also have incentives with safety. That is to say, if this particular version malfunctions, you're not going to buy the future versions to begin with. And this is something that spreads across society because people don't just buy something and then it implodes in their brain, right? You first do a research. You look at the reviews, YouTube reviews, like site reviews, you speak in communities, which actively means that there are mechanisms through which you can actively select out the devices that are the safest and most efficient for you, and over the long term, those devices are selling more units, they're comparatively more profitable, you get more of them, and they continue to be bought over and over again. At the end of the day, for a technology to have any impacts, it must be one that has more benefits than harms, and must be accessible for everyone, not only to buy, but to upgrade. We're the only team that proves with beyond reasonable doubt the likelihood for this to happen. On all those grounds, propose.
Thank you to the government member for that speech. I would now like to invite the opposition member.
Starting in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. 3 things from CO today. First, a principle to explain why this choice is never done with consent, effectively taking out government revenge. 2, why there's incentives and capacities for corporations and for upper echelons of society to maintain inequality and what the actual harm of it is. Because from low, they've just said, inequality bad. Here we uniquely explain how poor people lose all forms of agency to get help from the state and things of this nature. 3, how this process and people living longer means it's either bad for climate change or we run out of rare earth elements and war over them becomes much more common. Let's talk about the principle. How am I going to prove that this choice you will never be able to consent into it? I'm going to prove 1, there is coercion, and 2, there's an inability to ever understand what the choice is. I think the coercion is quite simple. 1, I think it's the incentive of companies, as CG says, to market you the possibility to change, but 2, it taps into your inherent feeling that the external space that you have, the way people are perceived, is quite limited and you want to do that. But two, insofar as, a lot of jobs now will have the prerequisite, for example, having a certain implant to be a banker, having capacity to feed your family now needs certain impacts, is probably something you cannot opt out of. Two, why will you never be able to understand this decision? Notice that all we are now, the collection of memories, the preferences we are, the experiences we've had, are things we've came through knowing through their senses. The way we choose something because it creates us pleasure, avoid things that create pain, is because we've sensed those things, or we have the capacity to know how those things feel by virtue of how previous sensory experiences feel. What changes fundamentally on government bench is that you never know how this is. You only have an estimation of how the technology and how feeling feels in the world based on someone's story. It's the same thing if I ask you, panel, would you want to be me? Yeah, maybe you have an estimation from interacting with me. Maybe I told you things about my life, but you never fundamentally know who I am. But two, this gets massively worse on CG, because notice that AI is given a task and chooses what process to pursue to maximize the task. At the point where you put an AI, for example, to make you happy, you never understand what changes in your life, what synapses change in your brain, because it's not you taking the decision. The decisions are not on a pre-made path. They're decisions that are organically created by this AI. No one should ever be forced to opt into this. But now let's talk about inequality, very specifically, why the companies have incentives, why they have capacities. I think the incentives to maintain inequality are sadly a story longer than time. One, insofar as this technology is massive for social mobility, anyone who gets the chip can do any high-earning job because now they have super brain power. Presumably, you don't want the poor to now take your money, so probably you want to block that. You don't want to give it to anyone. Two, just look at any industrial revolutionary things that happened in the past. We've said, oh my God, this will give the poor people so much power. Yet people continue to be made poor by other ways. Access to new things that appear is always limited. But three, yes, I agree some products can be cheap, but the cheap ones can be used strategically. For example, something that makes you feel less angry, less willing to go out to the streets and protest, less willing to say, hey, these conditions I'm currently living in are not okay. And people opt into that because it's the path of least resistance at the point where, some technologies are more expensive. And now my most proximate thing is that I'm poor, I feel like shit. I really wouldn't want to be poor, but at least if I can't feel poor, I'll opt into this. Let's now talk about the capacity. Why will companies have some products of high prices? One, these products come from medical technology where an IP exists. The example here is how cancer drugs or drugs in general, even though you can produce them on a large scale, still have exorbitant prices because oftentimes only one company has the capacity to do it and no one else can. So for a given implant that exists, no one else can make it, and the producer basically has perfect control of the supply and of the price and can charge exorbitant prices and make the most profit. People will be willing to do this because what you're selling to them is something critical. The ability to no longer feel pain, for example, the ability to be whoever they want to be. But secondly here, and very importantly, I think the monopolistic power will be huge. Why? Actual analysis. I think at first a couple of companies get the gateway technology. For example, the first way you combine the DNA to actually get to actually change a feature, or the first synapse. At that point, you have a huge first mover advantage because you can basically get the whole market related to that individual given procedure, which means that in time, there isn't enough competition so that you have to cater to different audience, sell it cheaper to fight someone off because there's literally no one to compete with you. But two, a government can't probably tell you to lower down insofar as there are only a few companies that need this, and the government probably needs these companies for, it's elite soldiers, it's elite people in public service. So why will this inequality manifest badly? I think two things here. The first one is that there will be a less need for labor. Some people can now do all of the advanced things like in the tertiary sector, research and producing new technologies can be done by the few that now have the extra mental capacity to do this. Laborers remain obsolete. AI takes their jobs, and I think a lot of people at the point where the jobs that don't require AI can't do them because they don't have these technologies. Probably these people remain poor. But But 2, at the point that you don't need these laborers, these people don't have the pressure to force governments for accountability. For example, they can't go out and strike. I mean, they can, but no one cares because their labor is not inherently necessary for society. At the point they can be compensated by just having a few set of people with the chips. This problem means that their welfare, the stamps, anything the government does to you, any sort of donation that you get, can no longer be agitated for, and that is extremely bad. But let's move on to why it's bad for climate change. 1, you probably live longer, you emit longer, you make more individual consumptions. 2, when you can and want to change something, and OG says you can mix and match certain features to see which one is best, presumably make thousands of these devices. The comparative is, yes, each of us has a phone that emit a lot of emissions in productions, but now we have thousands of phones in our whole body. But 3, insofar as you can increase business productivity by having these smarter people, we presumably pollute more. This includes all the harms of pollution, people not being able to breathe properly, houses being flooded. But secondarily, and I think also importantly, notice that all these chips require rare earth elements, to actually work, to actually power them. We don't know if they exist in space, and we know that they're limited on Earth. That probably means that there will be fights over these rare limited things because they are what allows you to be in the economic market in the first place. It allows people in your country to actually have the brain capacity to create products. And it's something that all the population wants, or all the government wants to give to people as an opium to control their emotions. So there will be incentives for massive amounts of conflict over these resources. Proud to oppose.
Can I start? 3, 2, 1. So, why is being coerced actually bad? I hate this fucking presumption in debating because it's not inherently something bad. My doctor coerces me to get medications so I get healthy. Even though I'm not always sure what this would lead to, I listen because it's probability of likelihood it will probably make me feel better. I'm coerced to get a phone because everybody does so, but then I have access to every single thing on the internet. Meaning, they can just say coercion is bad and expect to win this debate. They have to prove why it is inherently something that we prioritize over all of the benefits that the government generally proves. Firstly, to CEO. 1, I will explain. 1, you are more likely to know the effects of this and why it is intuitive. And secondly, why even if you don't know certain aspects, it's still a good trade-off. 1, why the effect of those things are clear. I would say the intuition here is with every single medication you've ever taken. It says, what are the side effects? What are the likely things that will happen to you? Similarly, when we do trials, we see what would happen in some cases and we see what happens in the majority of cases. I'm unsure why this will be something different. But secondly, you as a normal person just see that this is a short-term problem. Why? Because maybe initially people don't know what would happen. But to trial and error, you see that the person next to you did something and it caused another thing. It is intuitive that you can picture this. But lastly, purely on incentives, corporations have an incentive to be as clear as possible to get as much buy-in as possible. So they need to promise you clear goals, clear benefits, and to see that it is effective, right? Medication that doesn't treat you, no one buys it. Therefore, corporations have an active incentive to make it clear what you get and to make sure that you get it in the end. Therefore, even if they have some say that maybe yes, maybe you don't know certain effects, I think this is something that we have already accepted within society. You don't always realize that smoking every day will fuck up your lungs and you'll get cancer later on. Even if we try to make this a success and put information, many people don't realize it because they convince themselves that this is not true, or whether because they just don't want to believe it. Secondly though, I would say, even if you don't know the full information, if the after effect of this is positive, it doesn't matter if the coercion happened, right? Because it leads to positive benefits to you. So more people care about positive benefits as opposed to they were coerced or not. People get coerced to vote, but it helps them to make actively their voice heard and to get policies there for themselves. They are coerced to talk to with their family because their family will feel better when they're lonely and when they're in a retirement home. Meaning, not all coercion is good. The majority of it is not that harmful. They needed to prove that. Secondly, though, on like general inequality, and this would deal with all as well. My simple response is, What change does this matter? I know it maybe seems intuitive, but do they have mechanization or why this fixes the already existing inequality that already exists? I would posit their mechanization is but you can make smart rich kids smarter. Well, if you're rich, you afford good prep lessons that makes you better in school, so you already have an advantage over the poor kids that never had a tutor. If you have money, you have connection to get a good job, so it doesn't matter if you're that productive. More so, I know this is the right argument to run from up, but do they prove the margin of why more inequality happens? Do they prove that every single person will be harmed by this, or even if not, why it would impact the majority of the cases? My claim is no. It makes it marginally worse, maybe so, but what the trade-off here is, even if the system stays the same, you at least have the ability to feel better about yourself. Either because you're able to limit certain emotions that make you feel bad on an everyday basis, so saying that your life stays the same, at least you're able to control out the negative intrusive thoughts in your head, the imposter syndrome that you feel every day. Those small changes at least make you happier on an everyday basis. It's unclear what the margin is on inequality. Now, before I continue, opening.
Yes. So even if everyone has access to this, we prove that this destroys the things that people actually value, like friendships, emotions, feeling in control of yourself.
Sure.
Stuff like
Why? Why does one change, like fundamentally change you as a person? I would rebut this, but the intuition here is they don't prove this. Firstly, on whether changing certain things changes your whole aspect. I would like to believe that people are multidimensional. At least most of them, like we all know that it's not true for most people. But what happens is that you have multiple aspects of your character. I am a feisty, angry, bitchy girl to most of you, but I am a nice friend to Velina and Alec, and I'm a good girlfriend to Bisser. This means that you have multiple aspects of yourself, and changing one of them doesn't fundamentally change you. If I make myself ignore intrusive thoughts, it makes me better in certain aspects that I already value, right? If they care about what is important to me, let's say it is important for me to perform well at my job. This is what I intrinsically base my character on. If I am able to signal out the negative thoughts that actively make me worse at what I value to be the main character of myself, then it actually fulfills it better to be myself. Now, this was a bit, but what do I mean mostly by this? One, I would say that the ESL people did a very EPO extension because they say, oh, but you lose your sense of self. Why? I don't know why a certain change fundamentally makes you feel different. But secondly, I'm not sure why people make decisions on a poor basis that actively changes their holistic self. Meaning, you're able to make small changes to your character, to your behavior on an everyday basis, but I'm unclear why most people change all of their character, most of their characteristics, and that's the burden that they have, because they do not show why one change makes your whole character different. But secondly, even if it does, again, we already allow this, and principles are based on what already society does. So, if I fundamentally change how my lungs look right now because I smoke too much, this is something that we allow, because even if you are, even if it's irreversible, we allow it because it doesn't change your whole perception of yourself. It changes some aspect of yourself, but not holistically. Secondly, though, even if they say, but the change is something that you don't do, on yourself. Yes, you do, because you choose what to add. They say you get coerced to do certain things. We say most of them would benefit you. But even if they not, you still have some choice over to do them. We don't actively force you to do them. Meaning, they're more likely to not lose their self-sense, but even if they do, that's not something that we inherently believe is moral. Lastly, weighing OG. I think there are three things that we need to run. One, they say their principle, the way they do about their principle is that it affects everybody. But the mechanization of why it affects everybody comes in Bisser's speech. Therefore, they're able to reach all of their principle impact within where we prove that one, we respond to the critiques from opening bench to prove why it will be accessible to the vast majority of people, therefore allowing them to reach their impact. Secondly, though, we explain why these abilities give you more than they take, right? Because we prove why they're regulated well and why most people will do the choice well. But lastly, the responses and ways that we give to opening opposition are crucial, because if they don't respond, government cannot win on this is accessible to everyone. They can't explain why it's better to give you this choice as opposed to take another choice that you may have. We explain the way why, even if you take some choice, it gives you more.
Thank you, Government Whip, for that speech. We'll now conclude the debate and invite the opposition to win.
The reason I cried yesterday when I broke is because I know the reason why I broke is because of all the effort I put in, because of all the experiences I know, and because I know for the fact that it wasn't some AI doing those decisions, it was my own effort and my own decision making. Firstly, I'll engage with the best case scenario where everyone gets access to this and why we still don't get the agency and the preference fulfillment they want to talk about, right? 3 things I want to note here. Firstly, though, weighing with regards to OO. Uniquely, OO just tells you the reason why things aren't valuable anymore is because you feel like you aren't doing them or it's not you doing them. I'm genuinely unclear why this is the case, right? If your body is making the decision, if your mind is making these decisions, I'm unclear as to why you consider yourself to not be making these decisions, right? Why then is these decisions made by your AI actually not valuable and doesn't give you the agency preferences that majority of government is talking about? 3 reasons. 1, things aren't inherently valuable in the space, right? They're valuable because you understand that you sacrifice something for it, right? When I know that I spent so much time sparring to actually get to this point and debate in this room, I know that thing is valuable because of the effort I put in and the sacrifice I've made. Insofar as I feel like I was simulated to do this. It was fate that came and made me debate in this debate, and that I had no optionality into it. I genuinely don't think that something would be valuable. But 2, I think something is valuable because only I or only some people have access to it, right? The reason why things aren't valuable on their comparative is everyone can do this. Everyone can go and debate. Everyone can make mathematical decisions. Everyone can be a fucking scientist. Nothing is unique. The things are unique and valuable because you are special, because you stand out. Yeah, only a few people can have access to it. Maybe it is an arbitrary reason. Maybe it is because you worked harder. Maybe because you studied in math class better. But regardless of the reason, you are unique and you feel special. Hence, it is valuable and you feel special when you carry out your actions. But 3, it is the experience you get when you're trying to achieve something that it gives you value. This means the friends I made along the fucking way is why something is valuable to me, right? Because I have memories with those people. I have shared efforts with those people. I have shared things of like commonality with those people. Those things mean that the end point of me coming and debating is valuable, right? If I didn't have any experiences and I just came like from that room, debated here and fucked off, that wouldn't be valuable because I would have no other reasons to care about it rather than it just being an achievement, right? The fact that I made friends along the way, that fact that I like when I was going through loss, when I was feeling sad, my friends then came and talked to me and helped me through it, means that all those experiences are valuable. The implication for this in this debate is very important. This means the agencies that they are talking about, the fact that you can fulfill your preferences don't really matter and aren't achieved on their comparative insofar as you don't get these like unique reasons as to why something is inherently valuable and like inherently valuable to fulfill your preferences, right? This takes majority of OG's benefits out of this debate. Secondly then, on inequality, right? I don't think we have to prove inequality happens forever. I think our case works specifically well when we tell you inequality happens with regards to a time period, right? This is where Stefan's unique mechanisms come in. OO's mechanisms are not unique to is relevant to every time period, right? Our mechanisms are only in the initial stage, which is uniquely important, right? He talks about firstly with regards to things like patents. This means initially the cost is going to be high. Initially, for the first 10-15 years. This is the same thing that happened with computers. This is the same thing that happened with phones. The first few years, the product was incredibly expensive. A lot of people didn't have access to it. And the second reason he talked about is the initial monopolistic incentives, right? This sidestep or CG's like analysis about government subsidization, right? Because insofar as you can't directly subsidize everything in the first moment itself, you sidestep like all the mitigations about harm. Why then is a time period so important? The time period is important is because all the harms of inequality happen in such a short term, right? What are these 2 harms? One, I think in most cases, labor loses value. You can obtain value with regards to labor and production with less people, right? This means a company which required 50 people to come to its production outputs now only need 5 people, right? Because they're superhumans, they work like insane cognitive machines, right? This means that you don't need those 45 people anyway. Even though this is short term, even if it's for only 10 to 5 years, all these people's political capital is lost now. How is this materialized? One, this means that the ability to leverage the places they were working for, the ability to leverage the government to actually create things like welfare systems, create things like food stamps, and like actually help these people to come out of their poverty and actually improve their lives is completely lost, right? Because the government doesn't care about anymore because you don't have any production value, you have no economic output that they need to care about. The second reason why this is important is because this exacerbates already existent problems, right? We don't need to solve inequality. We just have to prove by inequality that is already existent in status quo exacerbates, which means already the people who are poor and harmed by inequality and capitalism are going to be hurt even more. How does this happen? I think intuitively, the poorest people in society have I'll take you like at 5:30. The poorest people in society have the least political capital, right? These are for multiple reasons, right? Rich people have lobbying powers. They have capacity to actually go and fund and like lobby governments and decision makers, right? Two poor people have like really hard, they find it really hard to centralize and create unified incentives, right? Because they have different monetary incentives and different like practical security incentives, right? So it's really hard to come under one banner and unify, right? This means they're incredibly incapable to actually influence governments. The only thing they have is the leverage. They have the numbers and the fact that economies are dependent on laborers and dependent on people who are working in production lines and working in manufacturing lines. The comparative that is very important in our side is that you uniquely lose that capacity, right? How does this happen? This happens in the sense that all the governments don't really have to care about your laborers. They just have to care about the 5 smart people who can actually go and produce these things. Before I go on to impact this, yeah.
You can minimize consent issues with reversibility and talking to other transhumans. Even if they choose suffering, we see that this is still better than you never being able to circumvent your human condition.
So like the thing is, like that's the final thing I'll engage is, right? I genuinely don't know as to why the human condition is so harmful with regards to decision making. Because I feel like that, like the reason why, like again, why things are valuable is because some people can't have access to those decision making, right? If everyone could do it, there is no value in it because there is nothing special or nothing unique about those decisions. They ignore that response, right? Why then does this materializes in specific harms to people, right? Even if it is for 10 years, people on the ground now lose access to welfare because the government has no incentive to actually provide welfare and care about workers, right? Care about providing like things like food stamps, which are indirectly important for the survival of poor people, right? This means like fucking poor people die off, right? Because there's no incentive for governments to actually care about this. I think on scale, this is the most important impact compared to like anything on the other side. Simply based on intensity as well, it is the most important, right? The final thing that I want to talk about is this idea about people will understand how to work. You genuinely can't understand it because unless you're first in the simulation in the first place, right? Because it is impossible for you to understand how your life will be like this because this is a completely holistic change, right? Every decision-making aspect of your life, every cognitive bias that exists or every cognitive mechanic that exists in your mind changes when you become a transhuman, right? So any sort of advertisement, any sort of like information that is provided doesn't give you the ability to actually feel understand what it feels like when you become a transhuman. It is very simple. We just get better preference maximization. We get better value. All these reasons. See you. Thank you.
Stefan, my man.